Hey, Thrive LOUD listeners, Lou Diamond here. Recently, I had Stanley Paget on Thrive LOUD, and he shared his desire and passion to try to save 1 million marriages over the next 5 years. Well, a lot of people have asked me what's the best way to learn about some of the programs that Stanley has put together. You can head over to Relationship Magic Academy and check out the Diamond Relationship Formula digital course. You could sign up for it there. In addition, Stanley's putting together with Dr. Sherry Campbell 2 upcoming events, October 4th and 5th in Tampa, Florida, and February 1st and 2nd in Newport Beach, California. You can check again all of this out at relationshipmagicacademy.com. Hear more about Stanley, and you could also check out his book, Unveiled, Secrets to a Marriage That Lasts Forever. Again, that's Stanley Paget at Relationship Magic Academy, his Diamond Relationship Formula, and all of his books and events for relationship therapy at your convenience. Check it out.
Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Hey, Thrive LOUD listeners, Lou Diamond here. Hope you're enjoying the month of August and everything in your summer is going great. You're going to love this minisode, which is a flashback to a year ago when I interviewed Neen James, and we were talking about her newly released book at the time, Attention Pays. You will hear all about the book itself, her philosophy. We even go into the specifics of how she facilitates a meeting and really how she appreciates the value of time. I also am sure you're going to love her Australian accent, her high-pitched voice, and her incredibly genuine laugh. Neen is quite a bundle and a ton of fun when she presents. So enjoy this minisode with Neen James here on Thrive Loud. Our Thrive Loud fans would love to learn a little bit more about you, for those that don't know you, because you've got a pretty famous gig going on, my good friend. Can you share with the listeners a little bit more about this recent direction about the attention paying, if you would, for profitability, productivity, and accountability, how you've been directing this particular message today, because I think that'll be really cool. So lead us up to how this came to be your focus of late.
Well, I think I'm probably just like your listeners. There's definitely no fame associated. However, I have been immersed in this whole idea of how do you get more done and how do you do the most important work. And so I grew up in corporate business in Australia. I worked in retail, banking, telecommunications, and the oil industry. And Lou, you got to imagine there's not a lot of chicks in oil in Australia, but I had the time of my life. I eventually set up my own company, and I realized there was a real need for people to be able to get more done. And so many people listening to this will understand that now more than ever before, we're dealing in a time where people feel like they have what we've named the over trilogy, meaning they're overwhelmed, they're overstressed, and they're overtired. And regardless of whether you're a corporate person, an entrepreneur, whether you have desires for something different in your life and you're really looking to thrive, I realized that I loved corporate, but that if I was to go out on my own, I would have more flexibility. So I set up my own company. Fast forward to us relocating to the US. So imagine I went from living in Sydney City to this tiny little place called Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is, for our listeners, it's like halfway between Philly and New York. So definitely not the city, definitely no water, no harbor, no hustle and bustle, but I love it. And so I had to reestablish myself completely. And what people may or may not know is that the majority of my income is the profit center of keynote speaking. And that's what I love to do. I love being with audiences and sharing how they can really focus on what matters. For companies, how can they increase their market share? How can they attract and retain that top talent? How can they really get those projects and those sales completed in a way where everyone loves working with them? And so for me, my predominant profit center is keynote speaking. And so often I would be asked by my clients, hey, can you help us get more done? And so that was what I was really focused on, was productivity. But I realized, Lou, that you can't manage time, but you can manage your attention. And so my work in this whole idea of attention came because I realized attention is the evolution of productivity. we are all going to be gifted with 1,440 minutes in a day, and you and I get the exact same amount of time. No matter how rich we are, how poor we are, how accomplished we are, it doesn't matter where we are on our journeys, we all get that same gift of time. And so what I realized is, while we can't manage time, we can manage our attention, which is why my body of work shifted, and my research, I went very deep in this whole idea of how can companies make more money when they pay attention to their customers and to their team? How can individuals have deeper relationships when they pay attention to those that they care about? And how can we as global citizens have a bigger impact on the planet when we take responsibility for the resources that we have? And so I really believe, Lou, that we and your listeners, we pay attention in three ways: personally, professionally, and globally. And when I got that clarity, that's when everything came together.
I like it. And for the listeners who obviously know I speak a lot about connecting, one of the key connecting core muscles we talk about is the power of empathy and the ability to listen. And really, in what is Neen is hitting on the head here is obviously paying attention and really understanding when you do that, how effective it is. I'm going to share with the listeners something really cool. I have had the opportunity to watch Neen facilitate a group of people. In fact, a group of people of very focused speakers, which makes it even more interesting, where she got us to understand the importance and the rules of being efficient within the window of time that we were working in. I wanted to ask this question because I thought that it was actually quite brilliant how you not only kept us on point, but you were very process focused in how the whole day was going to work. In speaking with lots of the different companies or organizations you speak to, help us understand some of the key messages and tools to help them. Do you help them change the way they think about the time that they have?
I think, too, if you take the situation where we had the opportunity to be in the same room with professionals who run their own business, they also, the majority of them are keynote or trainers, and so they're used to being the person who's speaking. So imagine trying to corral those people, right? But I
do it on my podcast show every single episode. It's really freaking impossible.
Not today. Today will be the exception.
Okay.
But it is always my belief that my agenda is to serve my client. And in this case, it was the president of the association. And so my role was to ensure that by the end of our time together, we achieved all of the objectives that she had outlined. She and I had spent significant time building the agenda, and we wanted to honor the people who had come prepared. And so we had worked. It wasn't just what was happening in the room, Lou. I think what you saw was the result of significant hours in investing in the agenda building and the rules that we had set up, the rules of engagement, even before people walked in the room. There are things that you can do if you want to facilitate, whether it's a conversation or a sales pitch or even a training program that you might be doing in your organization, is the things you do before actually have a massive impact on what happens during. And I believe in what we call B.D.A, which is before, during, and after. So some of the things that I did in advance was to reach out to the individuals through electronic communication, was to pre-publish some of the guidelines and objectives that we have, was to ensure people were prepared before they came into the room. And when we got to the room, I made sure I personally greeted everyone, that I started on time, that I reminded people of the agenda, that I didn't allow a lot of small talk or diversions or side conversations, that I was very, very clear that while I can be kind, I also had very specific objectives to achieve. I talk time a lot, and Lou, what that means is instead of saying, hey, we're going to take a break for 5 minutes, I'll say, it's 11:15. I'm going to start speaking again at 11:20. I would love you to be in the room when I do that. And so when we talk time instead of increments of time, it reminds people to look at their watch, and I started at 11:20. And so I think what you've got to do is, to your point about really connecting and really having these opportunities to connect with people, you want to make it safe for them. You want to make sure they understand what those guidelines are, but you also want to be accountable for what you declare. So if you say you're going to start at 11:20, then you better do it. So that's the accountability piece. And I also made sure too that we had built sections in the agenda if we had to go a little off track. Well, when would that happen? Also honoring our body's circadian rhythm. So for some people, they get a little bit more tired in the afternoon. So making sure that we could really make sure that we were leveraging that they had like food and resources. So there's all sorts of things that go into facilitating things like that. But I think what's very clear to people that were in that room is that there was no messing around. I was super clear about what we needed to achieve. And I think historically, knowing this particular organization, that conversations have been allowed to go off track. People have been allowed to go off the agenda. And I know the president wanted to set a tone for her presidential year. And so that meeting was also part of a bigger agenda that she's running very specific meetings, very focused meetings, very productive meetings. And I wanted to honor everything about that. But I also wanted to make sure that everyone felt heard. And there was one or two people who I could see were really struggling with my facilitation style. And so I made sure I connected with them in the break.
I apologize
and
for
so
that.
People made... You weren't on my list, honey. But I think what's interesting is, as a facilitator, for anyone listening to this, we facilitate conversations at home, at work, with our clients, with potential clients in business development, at networking events. And so we have to be very, very aware of not just what we're saying, but what our body language is doing, what tone of voice that we're using, what word choices we're making. And that was everything that you saw on show in that particular meeting.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Thrive Loud. Or find us on the web at thriveloud.com.